Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we have a very special guest, the king of Cawood Publishing, Andrew Cawood. How you doing?
Good. How are you tonight?
I am excellent. So I've been keeping an eye on your products for a while, and I was particularly intrigued by your previous Kickstarter campaign for, I believe it was King of the Mushroom.
Oh, Rise of the Mushroom King.
Yes, Rise of the Mushroom King. Sorry.
Yeah.
So my first question was, why mushrooms?
Well, partly it's because the artist that I work with quite a bit, who illustrated most of our books now, Travis Hansen, he often includes mushrooms and fungi in the art. Even if I ask for an illustration in the swamp, there'll be fungi, and we've done a lot of underworld illustrations, and those usually have fungi. When we did the underworld book, our monster book, Monsters of the Underworld, I decided I wanted something much more dangerous than the myconids. So we did a bunch of different versions, and we really like that theme, that underworld fungi theme, and the idea of spores, and it also it connects with Feyland and the fake creatures, which we've featured a lot in books as well. So it's one of our favorites, the artist and myself. And we started a story in the second monster book, and then we started to do that in all the monster books, add in some narrative that could help tie things together and give people more adventure hooks, basically. And so one of those was that toxic spores were being spread in the underworld, and now we get to really explore that in the first two adventures that we're doing.
Oh, okay, nice. Yes, I was looking at the previous one, and I noticed that was one of the rumors on your rumor table.
That's right. Yeah, I'm a big fan of those old school rumor tables, and really excited actually now to get to the adventure stage, because we did the monster series. We've done a campaign book which is about to come out, and but really I really like writing adventures and the story part, and so we get to explore that. And the first adventure and the new one that's going to start on Kickstarter tomorrow, both of them have long rumor tables that can help add more depth or to help throw your characters off the trail.
So, for anyone who is not familiar with Cawood Publishing, it's not just mushroom adventures. You've got a whole host of products, various books with new monsters, lots of settings, and especially you have the World of Myrr. So what's the secret sauce for creating compelling locations?
That's a good question. I think, it really, again, it comes down to the basics of having a good story. So when we did the World of Myrr, we knew that there were a lot of different locations that had really interesting stories. I mean, really, that campaign book is, on one level, it's a collection of adventure hooks again. There's 280 settlements. There's tons of information about the geography. So when we were looking at adventures and stories, we knew there's a lot of stories, some that I've run with groups over the last 10 years, and then others that I haven't really fleshed out. But there's the really good seeds there, the good roots to a story. So, the one that really grabbed my attention right away was this one of creatures coming from the underworld to take over the surface world, and using spores to create mutants and to create chaos. And then the further levels of that story is that they have a plan a clever plan of how they're going to invade.
So in Fall of Rivenhelm, is it all one city? Are the players going to go into the underworld, or what's the setup? Let's put it that way.
Sure. So you can play it as the sequel to The Rise of the Mushroom King. The first adventure is part city, part dungeon, part underworld. The second adventure, which it can be a standalone or it could be the sequel, which is the Fall of Rivenhelm. That idea, the beginning of that story is that the players are needed to help with Rivenhelm. So this massive city has been attacked. It's actually partly sunk into the earth. So many of the buildings are destroyed. Some remain intact. But the key thing that has happened, other than everyone fleeing for their lives, is that the queen and her castle have been captured. So the story is that the players have been tasked with infiltrating the city on the riverside. So there's some waterborne adventures. That's how it starts. And then you've got a city adventure, but it's more like a wasteland, almost like a science fiction wasteland adventure, because there's down towers and broken city walls, and the river now has flooded into the city. So you've got creatures floating around on barges and barrels. And you've got creatures that have mutated because of these dark spores into other kinds of creatures. So like there's mutant fish people. There's these mutant flying ogres, which we have from the underworld. And and then the very last the last half of the adventure is reaching the castle, which mostly is intact, but it has now been connected to the underworld. So it's mostly city adventure, some underworld adventure. As I'm kind of finishing it up right now, the one movie it really reminds me of is actually Escape from New York.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it wasn't my intention, but as I'm sort of, like I said, as I'm fleshing it out, and there's a lot of similar themes. So we've put a little shout out to that movie in the story. But it is because, this underworld army, the Mushroom Army, has invaded. But once they've invaded, they're going to try and rebuild those city walls and basically keep everybody in. They want to control this area and so you're going through this wasteland on a mission to save the queen, who's deep in enemy territory. And again, it reminded me a lot of that John Carpenter movie, which I love.
Escape from New York. If you're gonna crib off a movie, John Carpenter movies are great to do.
Oh yeah.
So you've got a lot set up in terms of potential story hooks and a lot of things for people to do. Where do you fall on the scale of sandbox versus Rails? Now, I always divide books up into 3 categories. So type 1 would be like a player's handbook, dungeon master guide, like full of rules and items and stuff like that. Type 2 is going to be like a setting, and maybe you have some plot hooks, but there's no real story to go through. It's up to the DM to find their own story in there. And type 3 is going to be setting plus like a defined kind of storyline, a direction that things move. Where would you say that Fall of Rivenhelm falls?
That's a really good question. Basically, what I've tried to do is have as many options available. So in general, I am a sandbox dungeon master, and the monster books and our fantasy, our World of Myrr, are sandbox, and you can really just explore and just there's lots of threads to pick up of the lore and stories all over the place. So that's in general what I like to do. But with these adventures, because we've just started doing them, we want to give people lots of options. So if you want to run it really a railroad type adventure, there are tools there and there's a structure there to do that. But what we've given DMs who want to have more options, in my game, basically my whole attitude is the players can do whatever they want, and I have to figure out. I've provided them a setting, and I have to go with whatever they do, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I've done with the adventurers. Okay, here dungeon masters. Here's a story, and I put some notes in the adventure, like saying it would be helpful if the players are this level, at by this point. And, basically with the Rivenhelm adventure, whatever way the players get to that castle and rescue the queen, that's the main sort of general task. But there's a huge sandbox there to play with. How are they going to get there? And what's going to happen when they get there? So mostly I want to provide that sandbox environment. So we give them rumors table. We give you lots of encounters. We give you, some NPCs that could be side quests. So we try to give lots of tools. There's extra encounter tables. There's extra tables that give different effects for the spores. So if you want to just do the regular sort of effect of the spores, it's basically poison damage. But if you want to get more complicated, we've got a huge table where, it can mean that the players change alignment. Maybe their body starts to change. Maybe it puts them to sleep. There's so many options you have. So in general, I'm trying to provide a sandbox environment.
That's interesting to me because I always thought the whole sandbox versus rails thing was kind of weird in the first place, because to me, it's like what you're saying. I don't mind if there's like a kind of storyline, and it doesn't have to be complex, like rescue the princess, rescue the queen. That's the storyline, but players should have option within the confines of it, because at some point, even if you're doing a sandbox game, the dungeon master has to like pick the topic, right? If it's like, okay, a king hires you to rescue his daughter who was kidnapped by a dragon,
Right.
like you could say like, no, we'd rather, set up a tavern.
Yeah.
But then like, are you on the same page with the right game? The players have to have a little faith in the DM to kick things off.
Yeah, exactly. There have to be some kind of boundaries. Otherwise, what are you doing? Are you even playing the game anymore? So, and that's interesting because that comes up so often now, because a lot of players, I shouldn't say a lot of players, some players and DMs, the game is very different from the way it's designed, or especially the way it used to be played. So yeah, I think, that's what I try to do too. Like, for example, in the first adventure, the players arrive in a city near Rivenhelm in a market, and there are secret entrances off some buildings in the market to a dungeon. Now there's 4 secret entrances hidden in different buildings around that area. However, the players find one of those entrances and get into the dungeon, however that happens, the story can keep going, right? And then from there, searching and following clues, as long as they get from the dungeon into the underworld, the story can continue to develop. So in these adventures, I just give a few hints here and there to say this would be useful, but and give some structure, because like you say, if there's no structure, then it's not really a heroic fantasy game. It's just random role playing.
Yes. Well, I've recently started to feel that there is actually a further point out from rails. It should go sandbox, rails, and then collaborative storytelling, which I think is different from a game, because game implies that there's chance, chance of death, chance you may fail. And if you don't have that element, it's not really a game, which is fine if you want to just do storytelling.
Right.
There's nothing wrong. But to me, that's very different from a game.
Yeah, yeah. To me, it's sort of similar to alignment, and I think
Yes.
alignment is really misunderstood because I don't think alignment actually is imposing anything. I
No.
think alignment is actually defining what's already there, and it's talking about archetypes. And no matter what you do, those archetypes are going to be there, and that's
Yes.
why alignment was so useful because it was giving characters NPCs and PCs definition. And if you don't have a character that's defined, again, it's like in the new, the new version of the rules for 2024 when,
Mhm.
a lot of the classes are starting to look similar. If everybody can do magic and everybody can heal,
Yeah.
and all the races have dark vision almost, and the races have no modifiers, then
Yeah.
how interesting are the characters? So to me, that's the same with a story, an adventure story. If it doesn't have some structure and some good bones there, then what is it? It's just open world.
Yeah, that's interesting you mentioned that because I struggle with that. I just we mentioned briefly uh, before we came on. I just finished my Kickstarter for Empire of the Undying Sun, which if you're watching this, go check out empireoftheundingsun.com. You can learn all about it. But I started it several years ago when 2024 5e was not even a thought. So when they came out with the new ones, I really had to think about like, okay, well, what do I tell people? Because there's some significant differences. And I basically said, it's compatible with both, but junk the 2024 character creation setting because the characters are going to be boring. I've always considered feats kind of like a cancer on the 5e system, because it's like what you're saying. It promotes sameness. Like there's really no appreciable difference. And I think you could see that in the what was that, Strixenhaven?
Mhm.
That module that they came out with. It's like 4 different classes all had basically the same abilities. It's like, well, why would you pick one over the other? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. We in our Monsters of the Wilderness book, we made a ranger that has no magic. It's more of a
Nice.
ranger rogue because to me, it's interesting if the classes are different and
Yes.
they have certain things that they can do that are special. And so we're also going to make a paladin and a bard that have no magic too. Um,
Ooh.
yeah, so that's probably going to be in a supplement for the World of Myrr. But I do like that idea of classes being unique and the races too. This idea, this politically correct, which is actually just not very bright. The idea that
Yeah.
somehow it's a bad idea to not have modifiers and to not have them be unique. I don't understand at all.
Offloading from race to different classes, I think is fine. But the problem is they left in all the other bonuses that go with it. Like for the dark vision, which
Mhm.
I rewrote the rules for dark vision to make it not so everybody can see everything in the dark. But I mean, the problem is, why would you ever play a human? There's really no bonuses. And then if it's like, for me, I don't feel the need to have to write my games the way Gary Gygax did. But I think it's very useful to go back and say, well, what were they doing then, and why did the things that they were doing work? And one of them was, if you were an elf or a dwarf or a halfling, like it was a very special thing. And it came with trade-offs. You got these great, cool abilities to begin with, but you couldn't level as high. So, it really, I think, gave you a lot more choice in the kinds of characters you wanted to play, as opposed to like when you can just pick anything, everything just ends up a bit like mush.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And playing 5e, which I love the system and the
Mhm.
2014, the original rules, I think are in general, they're so efficient and smooth, and young kids can play. It's so simple. There's a lot of good stuff, but I've had maybe a third of my players, their characters have been half elves because they want to basically be a human, but they want to have a few bonuses.
They want that dark vision.
Yeah, yeah. And the language helps too. I think they basically have an extra language. And they
that's
have,
right.
yeah, and they have the the sleep resistance. There's a few little details. Yeah.
Yeah. But getting back to Myrr, so that is a question with the transition from 2014 to 2024. How do you handle that within your world? Do you like specify like, hey, these are the rules that we think work best with this world, even though of course you can pick whatever you want, or do you just sort of leave it up to the DM in general?
We're going to leave it up to the DM, because what we just, doing monster books first was actually interesting because it was the most mechanically, strict. And if we were still doing those right now, then we maybe get more involved in the difference between 2014 and 2024. But now, since we made the World of Myrr and we're doing the adventures, neither of those things really have a lot of mechanics at all. And so the only thing we've done in the adventure books is, because there are a few, we offer 10 new monsters in the regular book, and with stretch goals, we might have more. And those creatures, they have 5e stat blocks at the end of the book. But we also put in conversion tables for OSE, Dungeon Crawl Classics, and Pathfinder 1 and 2. And we've actually made those and put them in the monster books and Myrr as well. So people, if they want to use those stat blocks, for other games, they can. But 95% of the adventure, 99% of Myrr, there's no mechanics. So they're really open to any role-playing game, and any of the 5e versions. Really, we've ignored 2024 because we actually don't know that many people who are using 2024 in their games. There's a few little things, like I think the exhaustion, the new rule, makes way more sense. And the monk's damage is much better. It's kind of more balanced of what it should be. But there's like, maybe a dozen things, maybe not even that I think could get ported over.
Yeah. I'm overall kind of disappointed in it, just in that, and not only that, there are definitely some improvements over 2014, but then they broke a lot of stuff that worked great. So it's like, why? But I don't know. Maybe when the update comes in, they'll fix some of that stuff.
Yeah, I think if that original team was there, and 10 years later they improved upon it, I think it could have been quite good. I probably would have bought that book, and I probably would be using that book. And like you, I a lot of inspiration for me comes from the old books, because I started with basic and expert and did mostly AD&D. And so I have a lot of those books. I've had to get them again because I sold all that stuff when I was in university and had no money, around late 80s. And now I've had to rebuild the collection. But those are really our main inspirations, are the AD&D modules and a lot of those older classic books.
I can definitely understand why there's still such a big OSR community. I don't particularly feel the need to use those same rule sets. Like I played it, I enjoyed it, but I also enjoy 5e. But I have to say that the thing that they really did well was, once they figured out like, oh, we can make money selling these modules, the modules were really good. They all had like their own kind of flavor, and they all had a sensibility, and you could definitely feel that, you know, people are like, okay, when's Friday night coming? I gotta get my snacks for the table, you know?
Oh, 100%. 100%. And I didn't realize that TSR made the core books, began to make the monster books. And then somebody said, you know, we could make adventures. And most of the people who'd made the core books, the rules, like Gary and other people had said, why? The whole point is for people to make their own adventures. And then somebody said, well, let's try it. And they were incredibly successful. I mean, I think they only cost, like here in Canada, they maybe $8 or something for a module. I mean, probably like 5 or 6 in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, that's really our inspiration for these books. And then we've tried to add a lot of extras. Like you get more monsters, you get encounter tables, you get some new spells and magic items, and and I think, you know, it's interesting too, the 5e campaign books, the core of almost all of those books was from original adventures. And then they just added a bit of window dressing a lot of times around it. But, you know, like they did, you know, redid Ravenloft, you know, redid Against the Giants, you know, redid Salt Marsh. Like it's all almost all the original stories.
Yeah, at least until you got sort of into like year 5 or 6 of 2014. I enjoyed Avernus, but then after that, they just, like, there wasn't a whole lot of meat there, you know?
Right.
Unfortunately. But that's good for us.
It is. There's so much space that is being abandoned. Like, that's one of the reasons we started doing the books, you know. With the Feyland book, I was looking through, you know, all the books in the beginning going, why are there no Fey? There were maybe, I don't even know if there were a dozen Fey in the monster manual. And to me, that's like the beginning of fantasy stories, is to do with those sort of creatures, you know, and Alice in Wonderland, and that, you know, those sort of stories. And then similar things have happened with settings. Like, there's no settings. I mean, I guess, was it called Ravnica, I think? And that's a setting book, kind of, right? The Eberron book, but they haven't really done. They haven't done that much, and none that have really taken off.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Like they mostly stayed with Forgotten Realms, right?
Yeah, and that does kind of make me curious about, you know, with the 2024 release, Greyhawk is supposed to be the setting of choice. And for me, Greyhawk was always like the only great campaign city where, like, you could make an entire campaign going all the way through the levels just in Greyhawk. Most of the other cities, like, they're good, but they always felt like they weren't alive, almost like they were staged only for a few set pieces, I guess you'd say. But I don't know. We'll see if the modern Greyhawk resonates with people.
Yeah, I mean, the original Greyhawk, that's the inspiration for Myrr. That's 100%. I mean, and it's funny you use that word, because that's exactly what I would say, is that it feels like it's alive. It has a kind of organic feel, and the one thing, the populations don't necessarily make sense because of medieval sort of ideas of you know, the reality of the medieval city, but everything else to me makes so much sense. You know, the different factions, the migration that's happened. It's a very well thought out. Like, he obviously, you know, Gygax had that for years and years, working on it and playing through it. And I think it's incredible. It's our definite inspiration for Myrr, 100%.
I don't know if you ever read his Gord the Rogue series, his books of novels, but you know, a novel should be more fleshed out. It should feel like a real place. and I generally don't get that from a lot of tabletop role-playing game settings. But for me, when I read through the old Greyhawk books and whatnot, like I feel it is the same as the novel. Like you really could be in that adventure.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah. I think you're talking about like there was one called, I remember one that has kind of a monster in the underworld in a cave.
Yes.
And
Well,
it was Rose Estes, right? Wasn't she the author? Was it Rose?
no, Gary wrote these.
Gary wrote?
So
I think
he
there's
wrote.
other. I think there were like a
Yes.
series.
So that was the time when Gary got kicked out of TSR. So he wrote two books, and it specifically says Forgotten Realms like on the top. And then that's when he got kicked out. But I guess he somehow retained the rights to Gord and Greyhawk and all that stuff. So he rewrote it. And there was like another 5 books. So the first book is basically a rewrite from a different point of view of the original Gord the Rogue that he wrote for TSR.
Okay.
So
yeah, I think I remember a few of those. Yeah, and I know what you mean. They just tapped into what was already there, which seems like a living world.
Yeah, I mean, no shade at Gary, but it seems like when you're at that point, when you have such a well thought out like Bible basically for the world, like it seems like it would be really easy to write a novelized version.
Yeah, yeah.
And speaking of other versions, we have here the World of Myrr.com, and you have a lot of your books on here.
Yeah.
So if anyone is interested, they can go. And so do you just sell PDFs or do you sell physical copies as well?
So through the main website, that's all PDFs. And then on Drive-Thru RPG, you can get soft cover and hardcover of the Monster series. And then the Myrr book will probably be available in about a month on both sites with printed versions on Drive-Thru. And then likely January, the Rise of the Mushroom King will be available.
Nice. And then, of course, so I believe tomorrow is when the Fall of Rivenhelm launches, right?
Yeah, November 7th, 7 a.m. here on the West Coast. So that's 10 p.m. on the East Coast.
And it goes 7 a.m. or
7 a.m. Pacific, yeah.
So then it should be 10 a.m. Eastern.
10 a.m. Eastern, that's right, yeah. And then it goes till December 2nd.
Nice. So for anyone who, let's just put it this way, DMs are often overlooked, especially coming on Christmas. Why not give them a gift? I'm sure PDF, and then there will be a physical copy too, right? Or just PDF? Okay.
So no, PDF, and I think very reasonable, around 10 US for the PDF and around, and around just over $20 for a soft cover. And then there's a hardcover boost option as an add-on too. The last adventure book that we did the Kickstarter, and we had the PDF and soft cover, and then people lobbied to have a hardcover option. So we've done that this time as well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, come on, everyone, get your DM some Christmas gifts.
Sounds good.
So you mentioned it's going for or it'll close on December 2nd, right?
Right. Yeah.
So when do you think it'll start being delivered for people who are interested?
So for the Rivenhelm adventure, our target is March. However, we're getting to be a little faster with the adventures. Nice. The Mushroom King one was kickstarted. The Kickstarter ended around the end of June, and we got the PDF to backers in October, and the printed books will come either just before the holidays or just after. So that's our main focus now, is these adventures. So we're trying to get them made a bit faster, and they're not as big as the monster books. Those are much bigger projects, even though a 72-page adventure is a pretty decent adventure.
It's a lot of
Yeah,
work.
it is, but it's not as much work as the monster books. So we're hoping to do 3 or 4 a year. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, so probably every 2 or 3 months we'll be shipping them out. And
Okay.
yeah, so the March is the target, but it's very possible it could be earlier, especially the PDF. I could see the PDF being ready even in January.
There you go.
Yeah.
Perfect for a slightly late Christmas gift. So where do you want to go from here? We've got Rivenhelm falling. Do you want to continue more with this mushroom underworld saga, or are you looking to branch out into other areas?
Yeah, we're gonna reach peak shroom with this. So we're just doing the 2 adventures with that theme that can be tied together, but you can play them apart as well. And then we're going to do something very different. That'll probably kickstart in February, and it's actually going to have an undead theme.
Nice.
And it's going to be very different than the first 2 adventures. So I like to change not only the story and the setting and obviously the plot, but I like to change the dynamic of how the adventure is flowing. So the first one, basically the players arrive in a market, and you could have a lot of reasons why. They could be resupplying, they could be just meeting, they could be getting ready for an adventure. And so the first adventure is really, you're in a market and you stumble upon clues. Rivenhelm, you're sent on a quest. As we mentioned, you have to go get into the city, get to the castle, save the queen. This next adventure, the third one, is going to be very different from those kind of adventure flows, the story. So we're going to try to offer something unique each time. We have about a dozen planned for different parts of the world. And and we've started the adventures in the 2 biggest cities in the world.
Oh, nice.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, you are a busy man, sir, and you definitely have a busy day tomorrow.
Yes. Yeah.
So I don't want to keep you too long tonight. Oh, here we go. The Dungeon Minister.
Oh, great to hear from a Canadian, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah,
Directly...
we're out here on the West Coast, near Seattle. We're in Vancouver. And there's quite a few people that we know in Ontario and Atlantic Canada as well.
Yeah. I believe he
is Ontario.
He is directly on the other side of the lake for me. So
there you go.
Probably getting his snow gear out while we speak.
Yeah.
But thanks for coming on, everyone. Links to the Fall of Rivenhelm pinned in the chat, in the description below. Check out World of Myrr. There's lots of great shopping on there. DM projects. Oh, and also 2 Wizards and a Mic podcasts, which I should mention as well. Go take a listen to those. Lots of interesting topics. And that's it for me. If anyone's looking for me Friday night on the Dungeon Delvers channel, we will be doing Classic Gamma World, where I am back to a normal human with no powers and no mech suit. But we'll see if that changes. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you all real soon.
Thank you.